Welcome to our global partners. Before we get started on today's vmLIVE, just a few kickstarts on my side. Today's session, as you heard, is being recorded and is going to be available to you on demand. You can find on-demand sessions in Partner University. If we have moved to events, so it'll be Partner University events, and then of course vmLIVE. If you are in Partner Connect, stay in Partner Connect, just go to the far right and you will see our vmLIVE tab. Because you are joining us live with our great subject matters, and vmLIVEs are for partners and partners only, helping you learn, market, sell, and deliver on VMware's product solutions and tools. We want to answer your questions in real time. So to get answers to your questions, share your comments, and engage in today's conversation, we are encouraging you to please use the Q&A. Speaking of great subject matter experts, it is my pleasure to turn today's vmLIVE over to Guy. Guy, welcome.
Thanks, Teresa. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for our cloud providers in VMware. And we've got a great update today. We're going to be talking about Sovereign Cloud, and we're going to be talking about the solution that we have with Cloud Director, with our ecosystem partners, Veeam and Cloudian. So without further ado, let's just do some introductions before we get into the meat of it. Dale, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you, guys. So I'm Dale Hoffman, and I'm the director who's responsible for our global alliance with VMware for Veeam.
Thanks, Dale. And Phil?
Hi, everyone. I'm Phil Bendick, a staff cloud solutions architect, part of the CSP program. And my role here at VMware is to ensure our partners and our providers are taking all our use cases into market, especially with what we're going to dictate today.
Thanks, Phil. And Amit.
Thank you, Guy. Hi, folks. This is Amit Rulani. I'm the Senior Director of Alliances and Solutions Marketing at Cloudian. I've been working with Guy for over 2-3 years now on the solution that we have with VMware, specifically on the VCD side. We also work closely with partners at Veeam and making sure that we have a solid data protection solution for you guys to take to market.
Thanks, Amit. All right, without further ado, we've got a fairly packed schedule today. I'm just going to provide you a little bit of background about Sovereign Cloud as a whole and the VMware Sovereign Cloud initiative. So why is this important? What we see is what VMware refers to as cloud chaos, which is really this current state of play for a large portion of our customers who have been using multiple clouds for quite a few years now, and now starting to understand that this is not as easy as it seems, and starting to question the right application execution venue, starting to be concerned about security, about compliance, and particularly about regional jurisdiction, who has access to their data. And this is a challenge for lots of organizations that, Sovereign Cloud is going to hopefully fix. Whilst organizations are in cloud chaos, organizations also have a huge skills gap, whereas we've got leaders wanting to build lots of new products and features and use all of the cloud capabilities that are out there. In reality, particularly now, and this is from 2023, actually let's say Q3 2022, my apologies on typo there. Really, there isn't enough resource and people with extensive experience to be able to provide support for their companies. And this is where cloud providers step in and produce some, managed service offerings around the cloud skills gap. It's not going forward. Sorry, it went forward twice there. This is also being compounded, right? We're talking about sovereign cloud, and we're talking about the importance of data. And there is a huge data tsunami hitting organizations. The total data is, more than doubling in size in the next few years. Data doesn't stay still. Data moves constantly, is in a constant state of growth. We all have bad data hygiene habits. If you look at your iPhone, for example, how many of your photos are years and years and years old and you never deleted them? The same goes true in enterprises, but it's much more important for enterprises, particularly those with vertical requirements and compliance requirements, because obviously the data is growing, the complexity of the data is growing, and now with things like GDPR, people have got to be much more on the ball about things like data privacy, but also data classification, which is key. And there's a bunch of changing regulations surrounding general kind of privacy and regulation within different countries. There's been a huge increase in the number of countries having privacy laws. And these are countries, within the EU, within Asia Pac, and indeed in the US itself. There's been the introduction of GDPR, which everyone's had to adjust to, and the understanding of what composes privacy data and personal identifiable information. And when you look at the amount of cloud utilization, particularly in Europe in this example, 66% of cloud spend is pushed into American hypervisors who are hyperscalers, who are subject to the US Cloud Act. Now, that can be a problem for certain organizations because US Cloud Act dictates jurisdictional control wherever that data is residing, as long as it's within a US owned and operated company. So there's real concern in the EU, particularly at the moment, around the regulation and compliance of data, and also the jurisdictional control of data. Just because you're in the EU doesn't mean you're automatically protected by overarching EU principles. We're seeing a lot of what we're calling protectionism coming out of different countries, such as Secnum Cloud in France is a really good example of a very, very stringent regulation, which pretty much blocks people doing business with non-national providers. So potential problems there. The bottom line is, this is a fast-moving space. And customers are struggling to keep up with it. They need partner assistance. They need to be able to use the right cloud for the application based on the data classification and the application needs. You're not going to put top secret data in a public cloud. At least I hope you're not. That would be, a really crazy thing to do. You might put data which is of, public classification in a public cloud, fine, or even a classification up, as long as it's encrypted and you're managing the keys. But when you're looking at, secret and top secret data, that sort of data is data of national interest, potentially, data of IP. It needs to be protected at all costs. So you need to have a secure boundary. You need to also be compliant with the national data laws. And this involves all data, not just the data that you're storing, but data created about data like metadata, accounting data, and support data. And support data can contain IP addresses, host names, credentials, potentially. They pose severe problems, or that poses severe problems to security. So for a sovereign cloud, it's particularly important that data stays within the service provider, within that region. And of course, you need partnerships to succeed in the world. We just saw the skills shortage that exists. Customers can't do this by themselves. They need partners who also have a good understanding of how to do business with integrators and operators who can support them as well. So the end goal here is to drive us a data sovereignty practice and to ensure that your application development that you're doing is secure at all levels. Too often we see developer teams doing one thing and not necessarily talking to the data privacy officer, not understanding the actual importance of the data that they're consuming, all the data they're outputting and potentially sharing. Clear drivers for businesses with sovereign clouds. 71% of organizations classify their sensitive data as top secret. 62% say their current cloud does not meet their data sovereignty requirements. There's a big increase in highly sensitive data, and that's going to just get bigger as we look at AI and data analytics and data derived from data. An amazing 50% of EU companies put classified data in public cloud, so increasing their risk surface, basically. So what is a VMware sovereign cloud? So this is a cloud that is operated and owned by a sovereign entity, an independent legal entity within the nation. That nation has, that company has jurisdictional control over its data. No other foreign authorities can assert any authority over that data. And all data, metadata, accounting data, support data, is resident within that nation and controlled and operated within that jurisdiction. And lastly, this is operated and managed by sovereign citizens. Depending on what vertical you're addressing, if it's military or defense, they would be, security cleared citizens, and there's various levels of security clearance depending on what country you're in. So trusted local operated sovereign cloud providers, they specialize in things like data protection. They specialize in data classification and classification assessments. They're able to control access to and restrict access to data, and particularly, stopping data going outside the border. They also demonstrate some social values. This is things like environment, social, and governance. So a lot of our national providers who deal with government, for example, they have to have a stance about the environment. Typically, they have to be running data centers that are carbon neutral, for example. This is going to help customers like future-proof against cloud lock-in. vSphere is pretty much prevalent in all enterprises globally. This means that there is no kind of lock-in to the environment that you're using. You're going from one vSphere cloud to another vSphere cloud, and you can equally go out that vSphere cloud into another vSphere cloud. So future-proofing against lock-in and also, changing geopolitics and changing regulation is what a sovereign cloud aims to deliver. And we have 39 partners, in fact, today in the Sovereign Cloud initiative with VMware. And these partners, as I've said, on the left here, you can see owned and operated, not susceptible to foreign authorities. Data is resident. They provide innovation and data services. That's one of the key things. A VMware cloud partner, particularly a sovereign cloud partner, needs to be able to innovate in line with where the industry is going, where cloud is going. So using things like our Tanzu portfolio, using data services, and using other partner and ecosystem services, they can achieve this. And we created this 20-point scale against these 4 key areas. So data independence and interoperability, that's all about being able to kind of move data around, having choice of cloud. Data security and continuous compliance, obviously keeping control of the data and making sure it's compliant. Data sovereignty and jurisdictional control, that is about the legal aspects of who has rights over that data. And data access and integrity, controlling access and ensuring data security, data backup, data DR, and things like that. How do we do this? We have a platform. It's a cloud verified platform fundamentally, with the sovereign capabilities laid on top. This enables providers to deliver monitoring services, networking compliance, key management, data protection, Tanzu services, and obviously ecosystem services, of which we're going to talk about today. So just diving into a bit more of that attestation, that 20-point list, if you're kind of curious of what's in there, it might seem like a short list, but believe me, when you start looking at all of these different things, it turns out to be quite a substantial attestation for a partner to do. So in terms of security, data subject to jurisdictional controls, data residency, jurisdictional autonomy, in terms of compliance, multiple data centers in the jurisdiction, that's really important. Data must be able to be immutable, i.e. not changeable and protected. Backup within the jurisdiction, DR within the jurisdiction, data availability in jurisdiction, and very importantly, secure network connectivity. So you need to provide that security of data in transit and at rest. And you can read the rest of them here, but this is pretty much what you would expect. The big one being the compliance and the sovereign controls. particularly in the controls, things like third-party audits, data governance processes, zero trust security as a standard, encryption availability, and bring your own keys, KMS, air gap deployments. This is where deployments can be totally offline, totally disconnected, and therefore protected from any outbound incoming sort of threats. And obviously auditing being very, very important here. So when we look at the ecosystem then, on the left here, we've got services, data services. This was an extension we created about, I think it was about 4 or 5 months ago now, the data service extension for Cloud Director. This today delivers messaging services with RabbitMQ, SQL services. We're going to have a NoSQL as well with MongoDB that's coming out. I think it's next month. We have a solution with Cloudian where we can combine things like Greenplum with the Cloudian S3 object storage and produce data lakehouse services. So key use cases for innovation. From a security perspective, we obviously have NSX today. VMware doesn't present the whole answer here. So we need partners to come in and fill the gaps. Fortanix is one of those partners providing multi-tenanted key management services integrated with Cloud Director, and therefore able to provide that encryption and decryption capability for customers. From a monitoring compliance perspective, we have a new ARIA compliance report, which is purely for sovereign cloud. So it looks at that 20-point scale, looks at all the standards within there that we can actually monitor from an environmental perspective, and creates you a compliance report of things that you need to verify or things that you need to change, potential exploits that maybe are exposed, and advises the cloud provider or the customer, this can be served directly to the customer, to make some changes to keep it in compliance. And we work with our partner Cavionics for what we call continuous compliance. This is ensuring that, as I said before, data is changing. You need to ensure your compliance constantly measures that change. And lastly, what we're here for today, data protection services. We have disaster recovery and migration with Cloud Director availability. We have backup as a service, storage as a service, bunch of capabilities in the data protection service space with Cloudian and Veeam integrated with Cloud Director. And that's what you're gonna see today and hear about the use cases and value that solution can bring, because it's huge value to upsell your existing estate with things like ransomware as a service. I've talked enough. Dale, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you, Guy. So yeah, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some really exciting things that we've been doing at Veeam, especially with our version 12 announce that just came out about a month ago, and I'll show you how it's very applicable to sovereign cloud. So this is kind of like the key features of version 12 in terms of 3 areas of concentration. First one being, data security. And I think we all know that cyber attackers are just absolutely relentless. And we in the security side of this have to be even more relentless. And Veeam provides some really good capabilities, such as immutable backups that go into Cloudian object storage. And Guy had mentioned that previously. And secure restore, which I'll describe a little bit later, but the ability to just quickly get back up and running in the event of a ransomware attack. Data recovery, enabling a very fast and reliable data recovery, and doing that within a sovereign boundary. And then data freedom. Guy actually mentioned that already, but if you think about it in a multi-cloud environment, the fact that we have a very portable data format basically means you have the freedom without any platform or cloud lock-in to move that data wherever you want to be, but within your sovereign cloud boundary, having that freedom between your on-prem and your sovereign regional cloud service provider. So this is kind of like the key features of the Veeam data platform. So we have our foundational version, which is basically our secure backup and the fast recovery. And then from a monitoring and analytics standpoint, this is where you leverage Veeam 1 in our advanced edition. And then in our premium edition, where you get all three of these things, including the ability to have a recovery orchestration, which allows you to do that rapid test and planning that you need to do, and a one-click recovery should you have some form of a disaster, hit you and such. Essentially, the solution is going to go across whether it's public clouds or whether it's private clouds, such as some of the sovereign clouds and such. And it also works from, virtual, physical, and also a lot of emphasis now on some software as a service, and in particular, what we're doing to back up Microsoft Office 365 and also Salesforce. So now let me kind of concentrate on a little bit more about the features. And I just picked 4. There's hundreds of new features in version 12. But I just picked 4 high-level groupings that are very specific to VMware. And let me start off with some of the enhancements for vCloud Director. And again, this is very, very important from a sovereign cloud standpoint and such. So we'll start out with CDP to CDP continuous data protection. I think this is a real key feature that a lot of people are really going to like, because if you think about it, if you have a CSP tenant that's running workloads, let's say in site A within a sovereign boundary, and essentially replicating to site B within a sovereign boundary, if that site A would go down, not only could you fail over to site B, but now you can do it with very low RPOs or recovery point objectives. Before, this used to take maybe on the order of 15 minutes if you were doing vCloud Director to vCloud Director replication. Now you can do this within seconds. So Guy mentioned about how some of the mission critical data that you probably don't want to put in public clouds, but are more comfortable putting in a sovereign cloud. This is something that could really allow mission critical data to be recovered very, very fast. And then CDP to VCD via Cloud Connect. This is really good because it really allows your on-prem customers to essentially connect or replicate to your certified sovereign cloud provider. And thus they can use that cloud service provider as the DR failover, but now they can do it with low RPOs. And then the other thing is hybrid cloud optimized and such. Now, again, from a version 12 standpoint, we can back up a lot of the public cloud providers that are out there. But from a sovereign cloud standpoint, being able to do all this data protection between the on-prem and the sovereign cloud provider in a hybrid fashion is, very, very key. We also made sure that we validated and tested everything with not only version 8, but also earlier versions of it. And as Guy was showing before about how Tanzu is a very important part of this for a lot of those Kubernetes-based applications, we now have enabled to have like a single pane dashboard where you can kind of see everything that's going on from your Veeam data protection, whether it's virtual machines or Kubernetes that is backed up by our Kasten product, and you can see that in one place. And the next feature was object storage, and this probably was some of the biggest things that we had done for this and such. So first thing is some performance improvements. So we added some what we call smart object storage APIs. It really just simplifies how we can communicate with object storage. So for example, if you were, doing a lot of writes to object storage via APIs, typically you get charged on those. So we did some performance improvements that can reduce the number of APIs and also help drive some of your costs down. But I think the biggest feature of this was being able to write directly to object storage. And that's important because it really allows you to, bypass writing things into block storage. And from a cloud perspective, it gives you not only a lot of the performance that we've added in there, but it also gives you that lower cost option for your storage. And then the last feature was this whole trust and immutability and cyber resilience. And this really built on a lot of things that we had done in version 11. But again, being able to do this across multi-clouds or hybrid clouds with immutability, adding MFA in there so you have that extra layer of protection, and a fast ransomware response, so you can monitor ransomware attacks, like maybe random reads and writes with Veeam 1, and take some proactive actions before you commit things to your backup data. And then this restore clean data, which basically means that during an orchestrated recovery and such with our secure restore process, that's now part of it and automated in there. So now what I want to do is just take you through my last two slides, but I think we all know that ransomware is really hitting us all over the place. And we saw a lot of increase of attacks last year get worse. And about 85% of organizations, based on our Veeam data protection survey that we had done, 85% of those orgs were attacked in the last year. But it's really scary if you think about it, how much of the data was destroyed or encrypted. But maybe more importantly, look how much of production data could actually still be lost to cyber villains. And if you page down, this is another scary thing too. 33%, a third of the companies that are paying ransomware weren't able to go in and recover their data. So if we reflect all this within sovereign cloud, all the things that are done to kind of battle harden that perimeter around the sovereign area and such becomes very, very key. And Veeam has some very complementary technologies with respect to what Veeam does. So to kind of continue with that, you can imagine you have this sovereign resident boundary. So basically, you're ensuring no data and such is leaving that region. So whether you're running on vCloud Director or you're running on vCloud Foundation, Veeam's solution actually is platform independent, hardware independent, and such. And the fact that we interface directly into the hypervisor, it just gives us that flexibility to work with a lot of the various VMware stacks. And as Guy had mentioned before, an integral part of this is protecting the network and protecting the infrastructure. And this is where things like NSX, come in, that allow you to put the right firewalls and gateways, leverage micro-segmentation, where you have to use some of the advanced features to do some of the actual intrusion detection and even some analytics to understand those threats and feed that back to improve your overall, network protection. But that's only half of the story. The other half of the story is about protecting the data. So let's think about it this way. VMware is going to probably stop 99.some% of a lot of threats from ever getting in. But what happens is they want the backup data. The reason they want to back up the data, the minute they get there, that's when they can go in and charge a ransom and such to the customers. So this is where Veeam comes in, being able to protect the data, essentially from a backup standpoint that would be resident within that sovereign boundary, or across multiple sites if there was any DR associated with that. And you have some options here that if you wanted to still leverage a performance tier and carry that immutability on with our hardened Linux repository, or the new feature where we can write direct to object with version 12, leveraging our partnership with Cloudian there. But if there is some sort of a ransomware, attack, what do you do? So essentially, you can use your favorite, I'll call it antivirus or malware engine. You can go back in time by looking at your multiple restore points and say, hey, what happened? Let me go back in here and find something where I know, for example, the malware wasn't activated. I can go off to the side and essentially leverage, Veeam Secure Restore, where we will scan. It could be multiple restore points, depends how bad the attack is across different VMs, and essentially remove the infections and such. Do a secure restore, which allows us to scan, make sure everything's okay. You might even want to run multiple scan engines on it, but validate that that production data is back in action so that you essentially could put it back into production. So the nice thing is it gives you an end-to-end intrinsic security and ransomware solution within that sovereign cloud boundary. Okay, I think we're over to Amit.
Thank you, Dale. And hello, folks. I'm Amit Rawlani. As I said, I'm Director of Solutions and Alliances at Cloudian. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about Cloudian and the sovereign solutions that Cloudian offers in our partnership with VMware. Next slide, please, Clyde. So this is a little bit of an introduction slide. I'm going to breeze through this. We've been around for over 10 years with hundreds actually the number right now is over 800 customers in the enterprise space and very, very large MSP space. And we're well funded. The whole purpose of Cloudian is to be that hybrid cloud data management platform for our customers, and in a lot of cases be that foundational storage piece for a lot of the MSP and MSP customers out there that are looking to provide cloud services or cloud-like services to their customers. And as we know, right, the standardization of storage in the cloud is around object storage. So we're really, offering that cloud storage to you guys to create those services around storage offerings. Next slide, please, Guy. Okay. So we are a leader in data management software for hybrid cloud. What we offer is a software-defined storage that values security to the utmost, right? We have military-grade security built into the product with a boatload of security certifications around governments across the world, in the US, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. Ideal for building services around sovereignty, data residency, data privacy, and so on. Our key tenet is the scalability that we offer with our product. Object storage in general is meant to scale, but Cloudian as a product scales into petabytes to exabytes. We have clusters running in production today in excess of 250 to 300 petabytes, and these are all live, spread across different sites within the same geographical territory, to talk about sovereignty a little bit. And we are cloud compatible. So what that means is we're built on the cloud technology. So S3 is the tenant that Cloudian is built on. It is a native S3 product. Unlike some of the other products in the object storage world that are built on a certain APIs with a translation layer of S3 put on top, Cloudian is built natively on S3. So any application that is built on the cloud or for the cloud storage systems will work with Cloudian, and any applications that are built with Cloudian in mind will work vice versa with the cloud. The other way we are compatible with the cloud is it's a software-defined storage. You can deploy it either on premises, in a service provider's environment, or even in cloud infrastructure. So it is built with the cloud in mind, and it is built for offering cloud services to be built on top of it. Next slide, please. So the key benefits of what Cloudian offers, again, it comes down to being able to provide the cloud services on premises or as a service to your customer base, right? We provide the capability to consolidate all your data across various different formats. Security is a key tenet of our offering, and ransomware protection with data mutability, especially working with our friends at Veeam, is one of the key features and offerings that we can have. Data sovereignty comes standard with this because this is deployed in your data center or in the customer's data center. And that way, you always have data residing where it's supposed to be. It does integrate with the public-private cloud, but in the sovereign context, it does not have to. And very important, this service is available through the VMware CSP points system, and it's all part of your points that you can actually acquire Cloudian software through the VCPP program. Next slide, please. So a lot of features here which will enable you to create your services around data storage, backup services, and so on and so forth. But key to that is the highest compatibility on the S3 protocol. Now, S3 is the de facto standard of the cloud for object storage, and we are built natively on S3. Scalability comes without saying because we do scale linearly. It is a flat namespace, so you can actually technically have no limitations on how much you can scale. There's no hardware tax. We're completely software defined. You can run on any hardware. You can run it as a VM, bare metal, and or even in containers. And then security, multi-grade security, capability to create the whole system in a geo-distributed format. So if you have one sovereign boundary with multiple data centers within that sovereign boundary, you can actually have your storage span all of those sites, creating a distributed system. And then lowest TCO. You can actually create your services with for less than the cost of what you get these services in public cloud, and you can that way make more money while selling these services. We have a few good white papers on this, showing how MSPs can create value-added services and make money with services around Cloudian on the VMware stack. Next slide, please. So I touched on this. Security is front and center for us, starting with immutability of data. As Guy mentioned, immutability is one of the requirements for the sovereignty piece with the VMware sovereign program or initiative, as they call it. And with Cloudian, you can actually have services that can keep your data immutable with S3 object lock. We have the best implementation of S3 object lock there is in the industry today. We are certified by various governmental agencies. SEC 17A.4 actually certifies us on the immutability piece, but we have certifications around FINRA, FIPS, Common Criteria, NIST, what have you. Data encryption was another tenet of the sovereignty piece. We do offer data at rest encryption, data in flight encryption, and then finally coming to multi-tenancy, right? As a service provider, you're going to have multiple customers that you will have to provide services to in the sovereign context. And with Cloudian, you can actually have a very, very secure multi-tenant environment that is going to be able to enable you to offer unique namespaces for different customers, quality of service controls, and very importantly, you will be able to set quotas and be able to manage and monitor each of these tenants in their own separate sovereign environment in a very granular fashion. The next slide will actually show you. Can you go ahead, please, Guy? We'll show you the integration that we have on various pieces. So what this is showing you is the capability to bill the usage of each customer based on each tenant usage patterns, whether it's on a per gigabyte of storage. And what we're showing you is you can actually go into the Cloudian Management Console and monitor exactly what usage patterns exist on a per tenant basis. Next slide. We also have this integrated directly into vRealize operation, VROPS. What this means is you can actually now fetch the usage on a per organization basis. In this case, each organization will be a tenant, and you can do your billing on a per monthly basis, just based directly out of your VROPS environment. There's a new field added in there. It was released about a couple of months back, which gives you Cloudian storage utilization per organization. That helps you, do all of your billing from one place. And next slide, please. I'm sorry, guys, I'm rushing because we're running a little bit. And the same thing for the chargeback integration. We also have chargeback integration for pricing for Cloudian storage directly out of the VCD. So there's very, very close integration into the VCD, and all of this is available on the CSP point system for you guys. Next slide, please. So what we're here to talk about is the data protection piece. And we've been working with Veeam very closely for a while now, ever since they launched their S3 support way back in 2018. But with V12, the integration actually got much better. So previously, as Dale also showed, there's a performance tier in Veeam and there's a capacity tier. Performance tier needed to be more of a NAS or a blocker of file system, which typically does not lend itself great towards immutability. With V12, now Veeam has the object storage everywhere kind of a mentality. So now you can actually have Cloudian as the performance tier for Veeam, as well as the capacity tier for Veeam. That gives you three things. One is it simplifies your architecture very, very enormously, because you now have cloud storage everywhere in performance, capacity, and so on. You can now have immutability everywhere. There is no gaps. Previously, the only option for immutability in the performance tier was the hardened Linux repository. That's good for small environments, but as the environments grow bigger, especially in the service provider space, you really want more of a hardened storage system in there. And then finally, TCO. The cost of having object storage be performance tier and capacity tier is almost 50% lesser than actually having a blocker of file system in there. You can actually read all about this for the TCO paper that we have on our website. And the next slide will actually show you how this all fits into the sovereign context, right? So this is a high-level architecture diagram of how you would set up, revenue-ready services with Veeam and Cloudian in the VCD context, right? This comes with multi-tenancy, security, data protection. In this sense, we're talking about being able to recover if there's hardware failure and what have you. Concurrency, quotas, integration into your authentication systems, QoS, monitoring, billing, chargeback, all of those things, everything available from CSP points. And what you're talking about in terms of services that you can offer, data protection as a service, it's straightforward. It is a sovereign ready service. With Veeam and Cloudian working together in the VCD context, you can actually offer all of this right out of your VCP environment. And then there's ransomware protection as a service with the data immutability that comes with S3 object lock, which Veeam and Cloudian also support, archive as a service, DR as a service, and all of this obviously comes along with data protection as a service, storage as a service as well. With that, I'm going to actually hand it off to Phil, who can walk you through an actual demo of the same thing.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Phil Bendick, a staff cloud solutions architect, part of the CSP team. So I'm here to enable you guys and show you some of the use cases that we were illustrating in our presentations earlier. So let's get started here. Give me a second. All right, I can see my own screen. Perfect. So welcome, guys. I'm Phil Bendick again. I'm showing you guys a high-level overview of VMware Cloud Director and what it details, especially to the provider side. So we were talking about object storage and what it means as a sovereign cloud framework, right? So what you're seeing here is a representation of the object storage extension. It's a platform that's enabled with our partner Cloudian. And below this, under the hood, it's called Cloudian Hyperstore, which is a clustered system that is heavily integrated with VMware Cloud Director. So what I'm showcasing here is all my tenants that I have integrated into VMware Cloud Director. So for example, we have all these fancy tabs, and I call them fancy because it enables you to essentially manage this at a provider level. So if we go tab by tab at the provider level, you can see that we have Cloudian enabled here as a storage platform, and we have a specific region. In this version of the object storage extension, we enable providers to actually add multi-regions. So if you had a cluster with multi-regions, you can orchestrate different regions for your tenants, right? So wherever these buckets may reside, you can enable your tenants and orchestrate that in that proficient manner. So if we're showcasing another side is bucket synchronization. So especially if you want to ensure that S3 writes and reads, right? So essentially ensuring the synchronization for the buckets are kept up to a par, right? We have storage policies, so you can enable storage policies at the provider level, and this allows you to essentially orchestrate storage policies for what the tenants are going to use. You can create new ones and enable those tenants and so forth. What you're seeing here is you could do cores, so global cores, if you wanted to essentially do any origin resource sharing across tenants through the S3 API, you can enable that as well. And you have roles for specific administrators and what they want to populate for those built-in users, right? So it's all RBAC control, right? So going back here to the tenant side, what I like to always showcase is the integration that we have with Cloudian, right? So what's very important to visualize here at the provider level is the platform, right? And the most specific thing that I always like to showcase is the storage tenant ID. Why am I showcasing this? Is because this storage tenant ID is pretty much the realm of everything, right? So essentially like API driven tasks like for building and chargeback, as Amit was mentioning back in the slides, is that we take the storage tenant ID and we ensure that we can populate every single statistics via API driven calls, right? So what the tenant did and so forth. So once we have the tenant enabled, right, and we, as you see here, he's already activated, right, MSP2, I'm gonna now go over to the tenant side, which you see on my left-hand side. So now that we're logged in as the organization administrator, which is MSP2 admin, MSP2 admin is the org admin, and they have the flexibility to essentially go in here, create buckets, create security credentials and all that. So I'm gonna showcase this at a high level so you guys can visualize this. So once you log in as the tenant, you can see that we have 8 buckets, the number of objects, you have the storage consumption, and the number of users. So for example, if I showcase this, I could see the top 3 users in my organization, which is the tenant administrator, the organization administrator, which is MSP2 admin. And we could see that we have all these like statistics as well, right? So if I want to see which is the number 1 consumption of the buckets, these are high level stats, right? So moving on to the buckets, which is the coolest feature that we have is that BCD and OSC is one whole integration and it works as an S3 client. So in the BCD context, you can see here that we have all this metadata that's associated with the object storage extension. So the object storage extension allows you within the framework to work with buckets and catalogs, for example, buckets with VApps, for example. So you can work in one context within your tenancy, right? And all the virtual data centers that belong to these buckets. So you can orchestrate that as well. So you have your basic security credentials that if you want to create new ones, you can create new ones. You can, see essentially if you have application credentials, you can create ones if you like. And also you can parse all your endpoints that belong to the object storage extension. So for example, if a tenant needs to know what their endpoint is, or what the endpoint is to use S3 APIs or S3 calls, they can derive it from here and just input it into any S3 compliant application and go forward with their workflow, right? So it's very robust. It has a lot of functionalities, just like you're as a provider, to enable these tenants to be able to use S3 at scale. Another thing that I like to showcase here too is Kubernetes clusters. You can actually back up external Kubernetes clusters, or you could back up what we call the container service extension. The container service extension goes in together with Tanzu. So if you have Tanzu enabled clusters, you can back this up into object storage as well. So you have that flexibility. You have external Kubernetes clusters, and you have customers that want to use Tanzu, which is 9 out of 10 times most of our customers are using Tanzu clusters. And for those that are interested in how this works, is look up a open source company that we actually acquired called Bolero. And Bolero actually installs a namespace into Kubernetes, and it makes these API calls and then starts saving these at a granular level. So you can back up Kubernetes as well. Going into the vApps tab, the vApps tab enables our tenants to essentially capture from a data center. So imagine you have a running VM and you want to capture that VM and turn it into OVA, you can go straight to object store. It's not a problem. So as you're seeing here, this is an illustration of all the VMs that I've turned into OVAs. And in the event that I have a catastrophe, what can I do? I can go and say restore the data center. So for example, if I want to restore this back to a data center, it's very intelligent in the manner it's going to ask you, hey, what storage policy do you want to put it in? What if I have an edge network or a public network that I want to use? The number of CPUs that I want to orchestrate for this VM back to its restoration, I could do that as well. So one of the most important things I think too is catalogs. Catalogs enables tenants to create ISOs and templates that they want to publish. As you see, some of them that I have here, we can publish these catalogs and make tenants subscribe to them as well. So the ones with the green check marks, I have published them to use in my organization. So if they wanted to, grab a Windows ISO or a Linux ISO or whatever the case can be, these are catalogs that are created as buckets. So if you guys remember in the last, when I was showing you the buckets with the metadata, that's essentially these buckets with catalogs. So we do have RBAC, right? So you can see all the users that I have as well created here. So you can do roles as well. So you see this user in particular is a VApp, a catalog contributor, a Kubernetes contributor. So these are the RBAC roles that you can orchestrate as an organization admin. So he has control of all these users. So talking about back, now that you guys have a high level of what the object storage details, right? Let's go into the bucket section. So we were talking about ransomware, right? Ransomware is one of the top 10 federal crimes in the United States, for example. So with the help of Veeam and the help of Cloudian, now we have the flexibility to protect these data and objects. Why? Because if we were talking about a specific framework called Object Lock is a functionality that allows customers to essentially use an algorithm, or let's say a framework called WARM, read once, read many, right? So all this is included into the object storage extension. So as a provider, you can marginalize these services and offer ransomware as a service, just like Guy was entailing in his presentation. So you can enable object lock, right? And then once you enable object lock, you can actually set the retention if you want. But in the Veeam context, we allow Veeam to protect these objects, and I'll showcase that in a second. So now that you guys seen what a bucket looks like, right, with all the properties, let's move over and showcase the integration with Veeam. And before we show the integration with Veeam, as you see this MSP2 S3 Direct, this is the whole new feature that Veeam has brought into the conversation, into a framework, right? How we can do direct, bidirectional calls between a bucket, right? Without having to involve what we call a SOBAR and create block level storage. We can now just leverage we can leverage now object storage directly into the Veeam framework, right? So what I'm going to showcase here is the relationship that we have with this bucket and our SOBAR. So Ahmed was mentioning that back we used to have a performance tier and a capacity tier, and you need a block level device and an object storage in order to create a SOBAR. Now with version 12, we can go directly to object and just use object storage. What does this mean for a provider? That's the big question here. What it means is you can now feasibly remove economically block level storage and just reduce your footprint in a data center. That's very important here. So if we look here at the performance tier, I am using a repo called MSP2 S3 Direct Object Repo. Now, if I cancel out of here, this is actually the bucket that's being used in the SOBAR, right? So if you notice here, we talked about immutability. If you see the bucket, it's MSP2 S3 Direct, and it's the same one on the left-hand side. Now, immutability, very important in sovereign cloud. So we have all our backups immutable for 30 days. That is the default that Veeam uses. So we can also change depending on your retention policy, however you want to orchestrate this. But you can set that up here. And once you set it on the bucket, right, and I'll show you guys back to this screen. If you go back to the performance tier, this is the same repo, correct? Now, the advantage of also performance tiers is if you're wondering why I only have one bucket, you can actually scale up to multiple buckets. So let's just say you want to do multiple availability zones, or you want to spread these fragments across multiple buckets, you have that flexibility here. So it's very advantageous that now you can reduce the footprint, right, in a SOBAR, right? And if you notice here, if I go to capacity tier, I'm not even using capacity tier. This is the beauty of object storage, is how it's catching up into the marketplace, where we can use, you can put object storage at a performance tier, right? So it's just how the market is trending and how technology is advancing in today's market. So now that you've seen the relationship between the SOBAR that's being used, let's take a look at what the Veeam plugin looks like, right? So before we look at the Veeam plugin, the first thing that a service provider will do is enable the tenant to use the Veeam plugin. So let's take a look here. And as you notice here, I'm going to just click edit on here. And this is the repository, which is the scale object backup repository, right, that I'm using here. And what we have done is we have enabled this tenant to use this repo. Once the repo is saved and it's dictated to be used for the organization, for the tenant organization, we could take a look back now at the Veeam plugin. So what this means is that now that we have orchestrated these and provisioned this role for the tenant, now the tenant can directly protect all their VDCs, all their VApps, all their VMs within the Veeam context. So we're still adhering to the sovereign model because everything is staying within one geographical region, right? And if you notice in the screen back, I had the tenant can see the bucket, right? So the tenant is secured. They know that they can see where they're writing to, so that's very important. So to highlight here, this is one of the jobs that I ran, which is it's called vmLIVE Direct to S3. So I am essentially protecting this job, these VMs, right? If I click edit, it's using the repo that I showcased here, right? The MSP S3 Direct SOBAR. And it's going to back up my whole VDC. So if you see here, this is actually a VDC called vmLIVE, and I'm protecting that to object storage. So we're going to actually get out of here. And we have protected these 3 VMs into object storage. And if you're looking on the right-hand side, what we're going to see is our object storage backups. So these all correlate to each other. So you see vmLIVE CentOS 1, CentOS 2, and vmLIVE Win Server 1. So these are the 3 VMs that we backed up. So Dale was also mentioning RPOs, right? So you see restore points, right? So we have fulls and incrementals. So you can see those as well. And this is all going straight into object storage. And notice that, yes, I'm the provider, I have Veeam open here, but the tenant can see every single thing that's going on into their environment. And not only that, you have these features as well where you can do restorations, right? So for example, we're gonna pick one of these. Let's do the Windows Server 1. So this is one of the coolest features I think that exists, because now that we have object storage involved, this is actually going to create some API calls. And what it's going to do, it's going to talk to the bucket that you're using. And what it's going to do now, it's going to run a restoration process for the tenant to be able to look at their files from that VM and be able to essentially, let's say they want to restore a file or they want to see any changes that they've done on that specific VM, then as you see here, pretty instantaneously, right? So this is my C directory from that Windows VM. So let's just say, I created a file here called vmLIVE, and this is just a text file. So it's going to search through the object storage system. It's going to search through the bucket. And what it should do now is populate a vmLIVE file, and here it is. I'll just cancel this because that's actually the file that I want to show. But what I can do here is I can download this file. So we could download, this is coming straight from object storage, right? This is the beauty of this. So I'll hit download this object. And then what it'll do is it'll show me a log file of what's going on. And it's a restore in progress. That's the call that it does. And I should be able to essentially grab that file and do it as I please, or just take it wherever I need to go with that file, right? So that's one advantageous part of the file restoration, right? So you can also look at everything in the directory structure or whatnot. So that at a high level, it's one of the advantages of having object storage into the mix. And if we go back here, I'm going to take a step back, go back into the object storage tab. So I was highlighting that we have the bucket is all within one ecosystem. Notice that I'm not leaving BCD. That's such a key element of this conversation, because if we go back, the tenant could be like, I want to ensure, I'm piggybacking off one of my points of interest here, where this is the same bucket, and then they can visualize that this bucket is being protected. And all the objects are going into the bucket that the provider provided for this tenant, excuse me. So, this is just digging down to the Veeam constructor, the hierarchy of files, and it's just a bunch of folders. We could deep down all day long, but this is essentially showcasing that everything is within a sovereign cloud model. We're writing into a bucket where Veeam is in the backend writing to for backups. And this is pretty much how you can adhere to the sovereign model framework, use buckets and object storage to protect VDCs, or in the context of VCD, it's called virtual data centers, and protect VMs and VApps. And everything is in the VCD context is called plugin based. So when you enable this for the tenant, we have all these plugins. So you have the Veeam, the data protection with Veeam, and protection with object storage, right? So the tenant doesn't ever need to leave here. And this is all, plugins are all certified by VMware. So we ensure, we work hand to hand together and make sure this all works for our providers and our partners. And that really, this at a high level showcases the integration with Veeam and VMware and the object storage extension. And I'll take it back to you, Guy.
Thanks, Phil. Great demo. That was we're out of time, but that was fantastic. And hopefully people could see the value here of the integrated solution and really the power of what you're providing, right? If you've got VCD today, Veeam is really simple to install. The plugin works out of the box. Then you can install your Cloudian layer, configure your S3 buckets, and boom, you're off on a ransomware as a service solution. So really quick time to market, exceptional services, exceptional products. And that's what makes a successful cloud platform, especially in the sovereign space. If there's any questions or comments, please reach out to your local cloud provider manager, who can then refer you to one of the experts on the call here. Otherwise, have a look at the link I put in the chat to everyone, which takes you to our Sovereign Cloud Solutions page. You'll find some of this material here, and we'll also post a replay of this session there as well.
And Guy, if partners have questions as they're watching on demand, or questions after they've watched and joined us live, they can always email me at vmlive@vmware.com, and I'll be happy to point them those questions to the team of presenters today.
Thanks, Vanessa. Good point. Good point. So it just remains to say thank you very much to everyone attending, and thank you to our speakers, Phil, Amit, Dale, and of course, Vanessa, Teresa. Thank you very much for sorting out the vmLIVE and hosting it for us.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Have a good day.